coming to you from Asheville, North Carolina. This is GovLove, a podcast about local government brought to you by engaging local government leaders. I'm Rafael Baptista, Strategy and Innovation Director for Buncombe County, North Carolina, and GovLove co-host. We have a great episode for you today. We're talking about local government innovation with the one and only Brian Elms. But first, the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. ELGL is a professional association engaging the brightest minds in local government. Now, let me introduce today's guest. Brian Elms is the author of Peak Performance and was the former director of Peak Academy for the City and County of Denver. He is currently the CEO and founder of Change Agents Training, focusing on creating employee-driven innovation programs across the country. So really excited to have you on, Brian. It's crazy to know that this is your first official episode with GovLove. Well, before we recorded, we talked about the fact that back in the heyday of ELGL, we had recorded an episode with you, but we didn't have the technology equipment to make the sound good. So glad to have you on.
I am really excited to be here, Rafael. Thank you so much for inviting me back. The last episode, I think we did across the street from my office in a bar. So, I'm glad we're doing this on a Friday afternoon just before Father's Day, that you and I get to hang out and celebrate this as a great recording.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So our tradition is to do a lightning round just so our audience can get to know you a little better. So what book are you reading these days?
Oh my gosh. I just finished The Alchemist.
Okay.
Like the other day. I don't know if you've read The Alchemist recently or it's been a while, but I think I read it probably 4 or 5 years ago. It was fantastic. I got pushed on it by a friend. He said to re-look at it. And I mean, Paulo's a great writer, so that's really fascinating. Before The Alchemist, I think I just finished Remarkably Bright Creatures. And then I think before that was Measure What Matters.
I like Measure What Matters.
Yeah.
I tell people that all the time. Like my tagline. If you don't care about it, don't measure.
I mean, Rafael, there's a great part in that book where it talks about how ideas are useless. It's implementation. Coming up with an idea is nothing. Making it work is everything.
Do you listen to the Hidden Brain podcast, Brian?
I do from time to time, yeah.
So they're doing a series right now on innovation, and one of my team members sent me an episode they did, and it's all about execution. The ideas are worthless, execution where it's at. And it was really interesting. You might enjoy it.
Yeah, please forward it over to me.
Okay, will do. All right. What was the first album you bought?
Well, I love that you're asking that question because 2 weeks ago I was in Manhattan at the Hammerstein Ballroom to see the band Madness.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're familiar with Madness, but they came out in 1979 and they were a ska band from England.
Okay.
They haven't been to the US in 15 years. And I got to see Madness. The very first album I ever purchased is called One Step Beyond. And I bought that when I was a child, probably in 1985, 1984. And I've had that album since then.
Nice.
Album, Rafael, album.
My wife just bought an album the other day, a record player at a yard sale the other day, and I thought you could buy albums really cheap at the store, at like the thrift store. I was very, very wrong.
Yeah, no, albums have had a comeback, and we have a record player at the office, we have a record player at the house, and we really enjoy listening to music that way.
Nice. And where do you go for inspiration?
I have been a prolific, terrible runner most of my adult life, and I am a very, very slow jogger. Some people would refer to it as trundling. I refer to it as a brisk pace. But I usually need about 30 to 45 minutes a day of that type of activity. That helps me out a ton. And then, your other question about music is really where I go. So, two real places. One, I do a run almost every day. And then two, I am a music nerd. I go to concerts almost every week. I go to travel to see people play. This weekend, we're going to go see the Black Pumas. Next weekend, we're going to go see Sam Wilson Jr. It's just a place where I love to watch people put on a show.
Oh, nice. Well, we've talked a little bit about music nerd, so let's talk about innovation nerd. Let's talk about the topic at hand. Um, so, you're founder of Denver Peak Academy, which is probably one of the more famous government innovation programs out there. Do the change agent training. Um, and one of the things I want to talk to you about is innovation in local government. I'm an innovation director, so I'm always trying to do my job better. So I'm hoping that I can get some free consulting out of you for the next 40 minutes. But realistically, I think this is just a topic that's hard for folks. I mean, everyone wants to be innovative, but how do you do it? Um,
Yeah,
so I want, yeah,
there's a lot of secrets to that, Rob. I mean, I think the biggest piece is everyone wants to say they do it, and very few have the perseverance to go through the difficult challenges of making change. It's not just local government that struggles with this. It's every organization, no matter how large the bureaucracy is. And I'd love to tell you that it's so unique to local government, but in my private practice, that's not what I've seen. I mean, I've seen Fortune 500 companies ask me to help them figure out how to get an offer letter out faster than 17 days. And it's not unique to us. I think the unique part is the sort of constraints and barriers that we have that not a lot of private sector companies have. And if you see constraints as a barrier, then it's going to be harder. If you see constraints as a way to win, then it's not as hard.
so, you know, what are some of the when you are talking local governments and when you reflect on your time in Denver, what are the principles you start with when you're having this conversation around how do I create this culture of innovation? What are some of those starting principles?
Well, I mean, that's a huge question. I think we could talk about 900 minutes about that and do like a graduate level course on what does that mean? And I
Yeah.
think I'm going to I'm going to try to decipher or decode this pretty quickly for you so people
Okay.
don't get bored.
All right.
There's nothing sexy about culture unless you're an anthropologist, right? That's the only person or people who think that culture is really sexy. So you have ethnographers and anthropologists who
All right.
are really into this. And, in 1991, I'm forgetting his name, but there's a guy an anthropologist who wrote about culture. It's called What is Culture?
Okay.
And culture are the artifacts, values, and assumptions that go into an organization. The artifacts are really simple. Those are the logos, the stories, the heroes, the organizational structure, the things you see in your budget presentation. The values are the norms and rules, the buzzwords and phrases within your organization and how you are presenting stuff. The assumptions, though, are the attitudes, the feeling, the trust, the belief in, the knowledge of how things work. And I think that's the piece that struggles when we're trying to make an innovative culture.
Yeah.
And I would push on you and say, Rafael, do not make an innovative culture. Make a culture of problem solving, a culture of curiosity, a culture of grit. And I think if you have those things, you'll see innovation as a consequence of those other pieces. But when your organization's assumptions don't help with creating curiosity, don't help with challenging the status quo, don't help with challenging the knowledge of how things get done, it becomes harder and harder and harder to create a culture of innovation. And so I always, any client that I have, I really push upon them not to do a culture of innovation and to do a culture of learning or a culture of problem solving.
Gotcha. I like this idea of problem solving. I meet with our new employees every Monday morning, new employee orientation. I talk to them. We have a culture of innovation. Maybe we need to tell them we have a culture of problem solving.
Yeah, I think it makes it less scary. I'm challenging you to solve a problem. I'm not challenging you to come up with the next thing in AI or the next
Yeah.
Google or the next Uber. I'm saying make something better than how you found it. And if that's the challenge to them, then you're saying solve this problem with us.
I like that. I like that approach. So I want employees to go on this journey with me. I want them to problem solve, right? I want to build this culture of problem solving. And I got all these principles I need to keep in mind. As when someone starts going down this lane, doing this work, right? What are some of the common barriers and challenges that you have found that folks generally find themselves running into?
I mean, you want to talk masterclass, brother? Like we could just list like the litany of challenges that we have. And I'll say this point blank. The biggest problem we have is ourselves.
Okay.
How we see ourselves in an organization, where we see our power and control, where we believe if we have power and control or not. I would say that is our biggest challenge, the belief in self to make a difference in an organization. That's number one. I
Okay.
would say number two, we focus too much on how the process or service works for the employee and not how it works for our residents, our citizens, our visitors. We are obsessed about things for us, how we do things, how we receive things, and we make things ridiculously difficult for other people to receive them. And I would say again, that's on us. We build things for us. The other piece to that, Rafael, is I think we build things for us that are tedious and terrible. We actually perform such cruddy work that it's hard to recruit and retain employees because we're asking them to do ridiculous tasks that take hours and hours. And the tedium of work just destroys the morale of the organization. Instead of saying things like, man, make this simpler. How do we make this less complex? We love, as government employees, we love making things harder than I think they should be. And I mean, the whole world of complexity for the sake of complexity is really scary to me. Whether it's permitting or inspections or business licensing or even driver's licensing, we make things harder than they should be.
I think you're right. You know, I'll say when I started my career in local government, I always assumed that the reason things were so tedious was no one ever bothered to try to make them better. And it was just what people inherited. What I didn't realize till later is people are constantly making things more tedious.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean,
and
we're making Rube Goldberg devices to turn on lights. We really are. And the craziest thing about Rube Goldberg is we all love the complexity of the machine, and we're like, oh my gosh, that machine is so cool, right? It shoots a dart, and then a hen has an egg, and the egg rolls and flicks the switch, and the light turns on. We just need to turn the light on. Let someone else make a Rube Goldberg device.
yeah, yeah, I agree with there. And I think one of the things I've come to realize is just it seems to be there's a lot of fear in government, right? It's one of my
Yeah.
tasks at work is policy development. And I joke around with folks that whenever I'm working on a new policy or an update to the policies, because some employee did something that was not covered in the policy. So now we have to close that off. I feel like that's part of my job. And the conversation I have a lot is, maybe you just need to enforce your policy better or train your employees to not do that not so smart thing.
Yeah. Did you ever read The Hard Thing About Hard Things?
No, I haven't heard of that book.
The Hard Thing About Hard Things is a fantastic book, especially for managers and leaders. But it really helps you understand when you make policy what that leads to, and it leads to another policy. And you've probably read about Reed Hastings and
Yeah.
Netflix about their, no policies policy. And I think that there are some really good places to get information about. Like the Hard Thing About Hard Things would be a great place for you to take a look at how he handled it. I think overall, what you're describing is how do we create a better organization without a hammer? And I think you can. I also think you can move away from a CYA scenario
Yep.
and not make a policy for one person's bad behavior and always show the thing you want to see, not the thing you don't want to see. Rob, how old are you kids?
I got a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old.
You are in the grips of parenting, and quite possibly the best times of your life will be looked upon these time periods as learning how to get your kids to do things that you want them to do.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle.
It's a brutal struggle. So just imagine you have, how many hundreds of employees that you're working with. We constantly tell them what not to do. It's the same with our kids, and it's the same with our friends. And as a once classroom teacher, the only way to get young people to do things is to show them what you want them to do. And if you want them to do something, you can get 80 to 90% of your classroom doing the thing you want. Getting 100% of your classroom to do the thing you want is almost impossible. But if you focus on the things that they shouldn't be doing, you're going to struggle for a very long time at getting the culture right because you're showing what not to do and you're not emulating or demonstrating what to do. That's a huge, huge thing for a lot of people to learn is don't make stop signs.
Make go signs?
Yeah. Yeah. Stop making stop signs and start making go signs.
So I get
That's
what you're
our new
saying, right?
tagline, Ralph.
Yeah,
Stop making stop signs, make go signs.
that'll be your next book. So I get what you're saying, and I buy into it, and that's what I try to do. But I'll just say, like, it's easier said than done, right? And I think one of the things that's really interesting, you're talking about Netflix a little bit. I have a neighbor who works for Netflix, and she does like a user interface on the app or whatever. And she was telling me that before they touch a single button on the app, it's gone through months of iteration, months of testing. She's like, we don't have policies. I just know that if I screw up, I'm gonna have to start back over. So I try to do a good job and I put the effort in. They can fail in private, right? If I bat 500, I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame for baseball. But if I'm running a 911 center, if I bat 500, I'm probably going to be on the front page of the newspaper looking for a new job. And it's going to be really hard to find a new job because I was on the front page of the newspaper. So I feel like the fishbowl of local government is a little different than the private sector. How do we bring that in? Because it's easier. I'm not going to say it's easier. It's more private to fail in the private sector, perhaps, than in the government sector.
I don't know if that's true. I would actually argue colossal failure, catastrophic failure in either way has a fishbowl effect. And
Yep.
if your friend who's developing an app or developing a product for Netflix and it doesn't work and it has a colossal failure, then you'll read about it, right? It'll be a launch that didn't work. Wells Fargo put out how they failed to implement Workday. So it's not unusual. It may not be Workday, but they failed to implement an ERP. And I think we have to stop thinking in terms of how big the colossal failures are and start looking at simple, small, practical things that can change. If I am not trying to pilot something, if I'm not testing something, if I'm not doing a go live before a go live, that's a failure on launching a new product or launching a new service or launching a new process. Anyone who is in that business knows simple, small, practical is the mantra. The more you're able to do that, your team gets better and better and better and better. And, I think there are tons of great examples of that throughout my career. One recently, I'm working with a county in Alabama where we're able to find, maybe $2 million in new revenue just by the way in which we are sending our information out to taxpayers. And because of the way that we send the information out, we've had a challenge for the last 30 years of collecting the right types of tax revenue. And because of that, that forces a bunch of tax agents to call through businesses and try to collect more money because we sent out letters that didn't make sense. Now, Rafael, we could launch a new program immediately and send out a new letter May 1st. Or we can take it a little bit at a time and learn from what we do, learn how people respond to it. Instead of trying to send a letter to 180,000 new taxpayers, maybe let's send it to 180. Maybe let's send it to 2,000. Then let's send it to 20,000. But we try to do change at the flick of a switch. And change at the flick of a switch does not work. You need to be able to move. You need to be able to make changes to your own change. I mean, people in Silicon Valley call it pivoting. You could call it, creating a pilot, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. But stop trying to eat the elephant in one bite. Chunk it down. Do small, simple, practical changes first. And then try to update the entire 911 system. But don't try to update the entire 911 system after you came up with a great idea in a room.
Yep. So I think I like where you're going, right? This idea of let's not think about the fishbowl. Let's think about the speed at which we innovate. And it reminds me, in college, I ran the student events board, and our faculty advisor, she always had this line, fast is slow, slow is fast.
I mean, when you slow down and you can handle additional work, you're removing some of that tedious stuff that we were talking about a little bit earlier. And one of the challenges that we all have is the scale of what we do and the amount of services or requests for services that we receive. And if you work in the private sector, it's really unheard of to see the type of scale of thing that we do. Now, if you're at Amazon or you're at Netflix or you're at UPS, you're going to see massive scale. But for the most part, our colleagues and friends don't understand the scale at which that we perform work. And I think that's something that throws people off. And we believe in this one and done theory of innovation. The set it and forget it mentality. There isn't anything I've ever worked on that worked the first time. In fact, the first idea is typically the worst idea. And we're going to need to move from the first idea to the second idea to the third idea to actually implement this change. And also see it as a continuous improvement methodology, not one and done. We're good. We never have to look at this permitting process again. I mean, you know how many people I'm working with right now in permitting alone who implemented a technology 10 years ago and don't understand that they memorialized terrible processes inside their permit system. And then I'll ask them to map it out and show me what they're doing. And they'll show me the complexity. They'll memorialize the complexity versus trying to untangle the web. Why do you force someone to come in 8 times before they actually get their permit? Why are you asking them to fill out the same application 8 times before they receive their permit? What's wrong with your application? What's wrong with your process that is forcing someone to do it with that many failures.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I You were talking about that. And I was thinking about the Peak Academy book and the example of the frozen yogurt machine and
Oh, yeah.
was it the gun permits department or what
Well,
was it? That's
it's
got to be
not
my
gun
favorite
permits.
example.
Yeah, it was
Can't remember what
building.
department it was.
Yeah, it was business licensing. Gosh, that's one of my favorite stories of all time. The business licensing team was just out of ideas. And so they installed a frozen yogurt machine in their office to try to calm people down while they waited 4 to 8 hours to get a business license. And here here's the secret, friend, or the spoiler alert. Making people wait 8 hours, it doesn't matter how much dessert you feed them. It's not going to matter, right? So you're actually adding to the problem. And I mean, I think overall, if people want to take one thing from this discussion, subtraction is the best thing you can do. And we are really good at addition. But if you think about what this team was doing, they wanted to solve a problem that was a consequence of a bad process. So they install a frozen yogurt machine. That's an addition. Additions don't make subtractions. The more that happens in our organization, we typically add to the organization. We rarely say, oh, let's take this away. Let's stop doing that thing. Let's stop doing this thing. We don't do that. We just add another one. And then we ask our employees to become experts in that new one. So I think if someone didn't hear any of this entire podcast and they want to walk away with learning something about how to transform local government, subtraction, subtraction, subtraction. The less amount of things we do, the less complex they are, the more we can help more people.
So I want to do subtraction, right? I want to make that process a little quicker. But at some point in the past, I did addition. And I had that one employee who became that expert in that piece of addition.
Oh.
That employee doesn't, frankly, add much value outside the fact that they do that piece of addition, right? And now I want to take away their value add, what they perceive to be their role. It's that's always, for me, I've always had that challenge of dealing with that conversation. I'll say, I recently had a department said, hey, we wanted to revamp this process. And I told them, hey, you've asked my department to look at this process 3 times in the last 5 years. And every time when it came time to execute, one of your employees fought it. You decided not to do it. And we wasted everyone's time and they got angry at me. We're not doing this anymore. I need an agreement from you that what I propose to you, you will execute.
I mean, I'm going to yell
Probably
at you.
not the best approach, but
Yeah, I'm going to yell at you about that approach, number one. But number two,
yeah,
number two,
bring it on. I need it.
number two, this idea of, I am my process. I am my service. This identity around the thing that we do, I think is really hard. And I feel sorry for people who have that identity. Because that means they're lacking that identity in their personal life or their life outside of it. So I think that's a huge therapy challenge, Rafael. And unfortunately, part of being a change agent and a transformer, there are some therapy challenges that we have. I think the other challenge that I'm going to yell at you about is let them do it.
Okay.
And if they don't want to do it, let them. And I think that's really helped me over the course of my career. I always go where people want to change, not where people don't. And I try to do everything I can to encourage the incorrigible and the ones who want to see those things change. And in order to do that, Rafael, I think you have to teach people how to see what could be better. And you have to give them that new version of life. But also, I don't think you should waste your time on those things. And I know that sounds like kind of rude or Pollyanna-ish. There are so many challenges in a county like yours. Getting stuck on one thing because the leaders or the team doesn't want to do it means that you just lost that time in your life. And there are finite resources, and time is a big finite resource. And I would argue to you, if someone doesn't want to change, let them. Give them a hug and tell them that you're ready when they are. The challenge with what I just said, Rafael, is when they call you and they're ready, is not holding a grudge. It's being open to it and say, you know what, I'm so glad you were ready because I'm ready too. But far too often when you make that call back to me 3 years later, I'm like, yeah, I knew you would call me again. I told you I was right. And it's like it's rude, right? Like
Yeah.
your own ego gets in the way. And I think there are so many places that I have failed at launching programs, running programs, making things happen based on people who just didn't want to. They wanted the show. They didn't want the go. They wanted the marketing flyer. They didn't want to do the work behind the marketing flyer. They wanted to tell their boss that they were going to change, and that's why they called Rafael. And when it didn't work, Rafael, they said, Rafael didn't work. Not that change didn't work. Rafael didn't work. And I think the leader has the biggest play here. And when we're in leadership positions, I don't think we understand how much people look to us and sort of hoist a mirror in front of us as we do this work. So I think understanding that your reflection is what you're going to see out in your team. I think you have to learn a framework of how you want to make change in an organization and not muss. I don't know if you know what muss is, make up shit. Have a tendency to make stuff up. And I think you should learn a technique and a framework and run that technique and framework. The last piece is words mean nothing.
Okay.
Actions are everything. Your actions have to have the same feel as your words. And if you do not do that, people will see through your change immediately. So as a leader in this, I always challenge people to, one, look at yourself. And then two, what are your actions saying? Because people will show you every single time. And let them show you if they're going to make that change. If they're not going to make that change, challenge them to do it when they're ready.
ELGL is excited to celebrate the 9th annual City Hall Selfie Day on August 15th. This is your opportunity to showcase pride in local government by snapping a selfie in front of your favorite local government building. Just use the hashtag CityHallSelfie and tag ELGL when posting your pics on social media. Get your friends, get your coworkers, and get creative to compete for prizes in categories including Best Dressed, Best Community Engagement, and People's Choice. Visit elgl.org for more information. We cannot wait to see your beautiful faces and your community pride on August 15th.
I like that part. I was working not maybe a year ago with the department. They had an issue, and I was with them. I was meeting with the management team, and they said, "Well, what do we do?" And I said, "I don't know what you do." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I've never worked in this space. Like, I really don't know what you can do. I just know that this is probably where you need to get to. Like, you got to fix this issue. I don't know how you do it, but you got to fix it." And they got really angry at me at first. And then about a week later, they called me back and said, "Hey, can your team run the simulation of this idea we have and see if it works?"
I mean, literally, what you just did is the trick of all tricks. Who should do the work? And when you're doing change, when you're doing process improvement, when you're doing service design or redesign, the people who do the work should do the change. So let the SMEs show you the way. Ask them what's bugging them, and then do something crazy. Take money out of their vernacular and take technology away from them. When we go to make changes, we want to just throw money and tech at it or money and people at it. And if you can make a sustainable change without money, tech, or people, you'll see a massive transformation take place. We are notoriously bad at implementing new technology. We are notoriously bad at trying to get money or fund an idea. And we aren't really good at putting people on things, because when we hire someone, we hire them in perpetuity. And because we hire them in perpetuity, it's hard to throw people at something. So let your SMEs show you the way. Ask them what's bugging them, and then tell them, what's your curiosity? Where are you getting because of this issue? And how do we untangle this web or unpack this problem? Because they typically know. They're just nervous to put it forward.
Yeah, they're scared. They're overwhelmed.
I think a lot of the overwhelm is legit.
Yeah, I think working in, an administrative services function, right? Not working in a 24/7 operation, not working in the field. Yeah. It's easy to forget the craziness and the pressure that those folks have.
I mean, there's 280,000 households in the city and county of Denver. I think there's actually more now. It's a lot. And they call and they ask for potholes to be filled, and we miss their trash pickups, and we send them the wrong mailing. We don't have their value assessed properly on their house, and we didn't handle the GIS coding for their assessment well. And there's all sorts of things that when we're not running an office that don't get in our way. But when you're running an office that has to do with appeals to assessments, you cannot see the forest for the trees. You are overwhelmed by the amount of services and supports that you need, that the last thing you want to do is talk to me about how to make it better.
Yeah, generally you don't want to talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, you're caught in, the innovator's paradox. We have a lot of work. Because we have a lot of work, we don't have time to look at the work of work. Because we don't look at the work of work, it never gets better. And when you're caught in that cycle, that paradox, you cannot improve it. And one of the challenges I think you probably are experiencing is, how do we get people off of that merry-go-round? And how do we get them to say, you know what, I'm going to take 3 hours to step off of this thing real quick, and I'm going to try to take a look at it. I'm going to have to step back on, but I'm going to take a step back first.
So how do I get that person to take that step off? How do I get them to take that first step? Because in theory, if I get them to take the step off, the next step is easier. But how do I get them to take that first step?
Simple, small, practical. Don't come up with a new innovation. Come up with a new thing. Come up with a new way to do what you're doing. I think the barrier to greatness is what people are afraid of, and they don't do that first thing. There's something wrong with your application if it takes someone 9 times to fill it out. There's something wrong with your 311 call center if people can't go to your website and get an answer. There's something wrong with what you're doing if you get 19,000 pieces of mail back. There's so many small things that I just mentioned that will help reduce some of the things that remove you away from the valuable work that you're doing. But if you have to spend multiple days going through the 19,000 pieces of mail that you got back, then you're not helping a new customer. You're not helping a new resident. You're trying to track down, why did this happen? I mean, I can't tell you how many organizations I've worked with where I'll go into their mail house or I'll go into their administration team and I'll see piles and piles and piles of USPS return mail. And if you look at each one of them and envision that every piece of mail is a dollar bill, it would scare you. I mean, each month when we looked at this at one of the organizations I was working with, they were getting 10,000 pieces of mail a month back. It's a lot of money if you think of it that way. Plus, we had an entire employee who was just handling that. Well, if we updated our database, if we worked with USPS, if we worked with a mail house, we could get rid of this. But we don't. And that's a simple, small thing that you can make a change to.
I like it. I hear my head spinning thinking about the ways we do stuff where I am and how we can encourage our employees. We had an employee who went through our innovation training program, and I ran into an event once and I told him, like, hey, your job is to sit at the courthouse and tell people where to go. But I swear I've never seen you sit in your seat at the courthouse. What do you do all day? I had a good relationship. I was kind of joking with him, but also just legitimately pretty curious. He told me, well, I tell people where to go, then they get lost. I have to go walk them there. I said, oh, that doesn't sound very good. He's like, no, it really isn't. Can your team come and help me make new signs so people know where to go? So when I tell them to go to courtroom 3, they know how to get to courtroom 3. I'm like, I think we can probably do that.
Yeah, Rafael, there's a company called Good Maps.
Good Maps, okay.
That can actually map your building, and people can pull it up on their website, and it's really cool. So one, go check out Good Maps. I think our friends from Louisville, Kentucky, one of the former innovation directors is there working right now. Teresa Rena Weber is
I remember her.
One of their employees. So there's that. I think the other thing that you bring up is a fantastic issue. Everything that you just described is useless work. Useless work sucks the joy out of jobs. And the more you do it, the less you want to come to work. What you just described in this individual is their ability to navigate a organization or a building that's somewhat confusing. I cannot tell you how many people have gone through Change Agents training or the Peak Academy where we updated signage. It is probably in the thousands, Rafael. This is a huge challenge for people. And I think it is something that we probably spend, 20 to 30 human hours on a month in some of our buildings, where someone could actually not have to do that. That would be fantastic. So I think you've identified where that tedium exists. You've identified where some of those challenges are. And I don't know a lot of leaders in organizations who know this is happening throughout the organization. They don't know that there's someone who does this. And it's unfortunate because you can remove that work and get this person a better job that's more fulfilling, where they're helping people in the courthouse. You're scared, you're nervous, you're stressed, you're probably there not for a good reason. And now you're going to get lost. And now you're mortified that if you're late, you're probably going to get in more trouble. It's one of those things where we do this to our customers instead of helping them navigate. He or she, they could be handing something to them. Hey, courthouse 3, and here's the directions. They could be creating things on the ground that point you in directions, because most people look at the ground while they walk, especially with their phone out. There's wonderful ways to do that. We started painting highways in merge lanes. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but when you drive, sometimes the highway will be painted, I-10 is this way, and it'll be painted on the actual lane you need to be in.
I always like that.
It's genius. Do that. It's a great way to let people know they don't have to, freak out to get into 10, or they don't have to freak out to get into 75. And it is a wonderful way to help people. Design, my friend. It is so much fun, and there's so much room for improvement in this world. I don't know, Rafael, if you've ever met Daro Mott. But Daro was in
once, yes.
Yeah,
awesome
Daro was in Louisville, Kentucky for a while, and man, he had the best dad jokes on the planet. I haven't talked to that guy forever, so we got to give a shout out to Daro. But he used to say, "The largest room in the building, the room for improvement." And I mean, I think about that all the time, especially with what you just described. You're talking about something that is not on the minds of the executives in the building who are trying to resolve for homelessness. They're trying to resolve for crime. They're trying to resolve for hunger. You're trying to resolve for economic development. The last thing that you're thinking about is, I pay a full FTE to help people navigate the courtroom.
Yep. That's a good point. And I think what I've noticed in my career is the best leaders are the ones who empower their folks to take care of those problems. So they're not stepping away from fixing homelessness, but they understand that there's probably opportunities for improvement, and they encourage people to fix them.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying what you do to get frontline employees engaged in wanting to make innovation and change in an organization. You teach them a few things, you challenge them to make it better, and then you give them the proper tools to perform the job. It drives me nuts when I see a frontline employee trying to wing it because we didn't give them the proper tool to perform the job. That absolutely destroys my heart. So that kills me. The other piece is on the leadership side is we've got to be better observers without judgment. And if you're watching this individual work, and as they move through their stuff, understand that this is what they're doing because they think this is the best way to do it, or they're afraid to do something different. So the first piece is, when I observe an employee, I need to internalize that if they're doing something that doesn't have value, that's tedious or useless, as a boss, it's my fault. It's my fault. And if I take that, then I'm going to observe my employee, and I'm not going to judge them for doing what I made them do. So then I have to internalize that and say, you know what, Rafael, I don't think that's the best use of your time. What do you think we could do to stop that? And I'm going to challenge them to do it. And then I'm going to give them things when they do it.
So what am I going to give them when they do it?
I mean, literally, it's the easiest stuff on the planet. Thing you know.
Does it matter if what they did worked or didn't work? Because inevitably, sometimes it's not going to work, right? How do I deal with that one?
Bad innovations die. That's number one. Anytime you have a bad idea, it's not going to work. It'll die on the vine. So don't fret about people trying to implement something that's a bad idea. It'll go away in a week. It'll go away in a month. Don't fret. That was I think it's kind of a red herring from what my executives, they're going to implement something. Well, first of all, I took away money, I took away tech, and I took away people. So whatever they're going to do isn't going to be catastrophic here. So that's number one. Number two is bad ideas die. That's the second. And then lastly, no matter what they do, if it works or not, I give them something. I need to figure out what that is. But there's tons of swag in your county, right? There's a coffee mug somewhere. There's a pen somewhere. There's a hat somewhere. There's a Parks shirt somewhere. give them that. And if you don't have those things, give them a high five, put their face on a wall, make people know that this person tried something. There are tons of ways to reward employees that have no financial costs at all. And we think the only way to make people stay on the job or to want to stay here is financial. And that is not true. Government employees are there for a reason. There's a purpose. And because they're there for a reason and a purpose, encourage them to drive that purpose. And if we take for granted their purpose, then we create a real animosity. And I think we take for granted their purpose way too much. If you remember Daniel Pink's book on how do you get people to do things, how do you motivate them, and he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if you think about what he's saying is, if you line those three things up, you can get people to do all sorts of amazing work. Well, government is the largest purpose-driven organization in the world that never talks about their purpose. So your friend at the courthouse chose to get that job. Those jobs are not easy to get. It is impossible to get hired in government, and we all know that. It's really hard. So when someone's here, respect that they made that choice. He has or she has purpose. They are there for a reason. Now we have to take those other two pieces, the autonomy and mastery. And you can only get those other two pieces, Rafael, with training, support, and help. Training, training, training. We do not train our people, and we have expectations that we have not trained. So you as a manager, do not expect something that you've never trained. That's inappropriate. So what we have to do in the local government world, in the state government world, in the federal government world is, how do we create autonomy, mastery, by training our team members to be great at their jobs?
I'll say, Brian, I'm going to push back a little bit there. I think we train our employees a lot. We train them in what not to do. The amount of time, and I'll just say that, like, I would say in my experience in multiple local governments, the majority of the in-house training I do is around HR, it's around LISC, telling me what I can't do.
Yeah,
I'm still waiting for the training from HR of how to do HR better. I'm used to here's what you're not allowed to say during the interview.
I mean, I think you point out a great issue, right? Most training in organizations is compliance driven. It's not problem solving driven or innovation driven. And when I'm doing a training, it's all about problem solving and innovation. When our compliance teams are doing it, it's about not bullying, sexual harassment, and performance evaluations. Well, that's not creating autonomy or mastery. You create autonomy and mastery by helping the individual know how to do their job so well that they don't need to ask for help, and they have enough desk aids and job aids to perform the work. Their mastery comes because they've gotten better and better and better at it. Now they can teach it to a new person. They're known as the person who can do this the best. But when we don't do that, we don't train them on how to be great at their jobs, then we miss all three of those points that Daniel Pink's saying.
Yeah.
Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Yeah, I mean, the amount of compliance training that I've done in my career, I probably should write a thesis and get a doctorate degree on compulsory compliance training. It's just fantastic stuff that we've all been subjected to.
I remember once in one city, I was an analyst and I had to take a class on ladder safety. It was part of the safety class. It was required for all employees, and we had to go up on learn how to go up and down the ladder. I also loved.
How'd you do?
I passed the training.
So you're a good ladder climber?
Hey, I wouldn't say the standards were very high. My other favorite one was I worked in a place once you had to take a hearing test to get hired. And when you got promoted, you had to take the hearing test again, and you went in this little booth, and if you heard a noise, it had hit a button. And I'll tell you, that was the most paranoid thing of like, was that a noise or was that my imagination? Am I going to lose my promotion because I clicked the button too often, too little?
Wow. I mean, those are unique experiences.
But
And
every organization has some kind of unique, crazy compliance thing, right?
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think in almost every place that I worked, there was probably one unique one. The city and county of Denver has a defensive driving one. But I'll tell you wholeheartedly, I learned how to drive better from that class. I actually learned how to put my mirrors properly. Like my parents didn't show me how to put your mirrors properly, but they showed you how to do that. And I was always like 10 and 2, and now they're saying don't do that. You're supposed to be below the wheel. I thought that was really fascinating because of airbags. And the ability to sort of navigate faster was really kind of interesting. So I didn't have the same cruddy experience. I actually learned better driving from our defensive driving, and we had to take it every year. So I had to go learn how to be a driver. They wouldn't reimburse your mileage unless you took it.
Oh, nice. That's a pretty good incentive to take the
Yeah,
training.
but also it wasn't a bad training. Like parts of it were terrible. Like don't get me started. But for the most part, I learned I learned something in them.
Fair enough. But I don't even know what we were talking about. We went off on this whole compliance piece. But I think for me, it's what I'm hearing a lot of is around is, talking about problem solving. It's helping people out. I like this idea of the training, the autonomy, and the mastery. Something I've learned myself over the years as I've taken on leadership roles is the more involved I get into the day-to-day, typically the crummier the day-to-day gets for my employees because I don't have enough time to get to know the day-to-day.
I mean, that's really fascinating. What you're describing is do you become more of a micromanager when you learn those things?
I think for me, I've become less of a micromanager because what I've learned is when I get in there and I tell them, I want you to achieve X by doing Y. What I have found is with my staff, if I tell them, I want you to achieve X, tell me what the Y is, the result gets a lot better because
Yeah.
suddenly it's on them to develop the idea. It's not on me. They can't say, well, I implemented what Rafael wanted and it failed. So that's Rafael's fault.
I mean, I think that's where you're leaning on your subject matter experts to really lead the way. I think great managers build a future state, and great leaders build a future state. Like I want us to be the number one county in doing this thing. How do we get there? It's going to be up to you all, but we're going to get there by this time period. And then when we're there, we're going to start winning awards. And I think that's what a really good leader can do. I think what you're describing is either you have changed in your management approach to your employees, or you've learned that they're all really smart. They all have great experiences. It's my job to remove barriers and be a better support. And as a leader and a manager, that's something that's really hard for us to learn how to do, especially when you're trying to change or transform an organization. This whole conversation is supposed to be about culture and innovation and how do you make that. The biggest thing that I can tell you, Rafael, is the number one most powerful person in your life, culture-wise, is your boss. Your direct supervisor has tremendous power and authority over the culture of your team. So if you're the boss, the coolest thing that you can do is ensure that you are creating a culture of problem solving, innovation, and learning, and not obsessing about the other people's culture. Obsess about your culture on your team and is it working? be a part of the bigger picture with the organization as a whole, absolutely. But you, as a leader or as a supervisor or as a team lead, have more power on culture than anyone in the organization, more than the mayor, more than the county manager. It is the direct supervisor. So most of us are direct supervisors. Sometimes we manage 3 people. Sometimes we manage 30. Sometimes we're the head of an organization that has 800 or 8,000 people. That happens. But recognize the 9 people, the 12 people, or the 22 people who work with me or for me. Their entire understanding of this company's culture is me. And if I'm doing those things where I'm encouraging them, challenging them, and getting them training and getting them to be great, then I'm going to be able to make a difference in this organization, and I'm going to transform how my team feels about our work.
I like it. And I think one of my things I've noticed is middle management's where innovation goes to die a lot, right? That because I don't know, I will say from my perspective, middle managers probably have the crummiest job, right? They got their employees and their supervisors who want all this. They got management on top of them, and they're just getting it from every direction.
What you're describing, Rafael, is what I like to refer to as the mortar in the brick.
Okay.
And I would argue that every middle manager is the mortar in the brick. And they hold together with the pressure from above and the pressure from below. And you don't buy a house because of the mortar. But you won't buy a house if the mortar doesn't look right. So you think about what you're doing here is you're putting a significant amount of pressure from above on them. And then they're getting a significant amount of pressure below. And as a manager, it's our job to sort of navigate that world. Middle managers are normally 50 to 80% of your organization. And teaching them how to say yes and as opposed to no because is a huge deal. And I would actually argue another piece, Rafael, is we have never trained them on how to be managers. We've told them, oh my gosh, you've done a great job. You should be a manager. But we didn't teach them any skill sets on how to lead your team, how to create transparency in decision making, how to scoreboard so we know if we're winning or losing, how to observe without judgment, how to make sure your teams are following standard work or standard behaviors. We don't teach that. And because we don't teach that, we then think that our managers, kill every great idea. I would say train them, train them, train them.
Train them in the go sign, not the stop sign, right?
Yeah. Stop making stop signs, Rafael. Start making go signs.
It's like the whole movement around we're trying to do roundabouts, let's have 4-way stops and the diamond intersection over highways.
Yeah.
It's all about reducing those
I love that Clover. That thing is rad.
They got one out here where I live. I love it. First time I drove it, I thought it was the weirdest thing, but I got to say, I love it. I've never seen a wreck on that thing. I've seen plenty of wrecks on the other intersections of town, but not that one.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Brian, thanks so much for being on GovLove today. I really appreciate it. For me, having gone through some of the online Peak Academy training, having sent staff to Peak, reading the book, have really been transformative. And a lot of the work we do in Buncombe County is based off of Peak. So I just want to say personally, thank you. And over the years, you've always been kind enough to pick up the phone when I've called and asked questions. So just want to say personally, thank you for all your help over the years.
Rafael, thank you so much. I mean, it is an honor to hear that you're using a lot of our techniques. That really warms my heart. And this, I'm always available. If people want to set up a time to chat with me, they're welcome to do that. It's not hard to find me on LinkedIn or email me and set up a time to chat. I don't typically hold you hostage for anything and try to provide as much advice as I possibly can that isn't too full of bad dad jokes.
We'll leave the bad dad jokes to Dario, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, the last question we always ask, Brian, is if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as the exit music for this episode?
Well, there are two right now that I'm obsessed with. One is Sam Wilson Jr.'s 1994 is a great song, and hopefully we get to see him play that next week. But I got to see Blonde Shell play Salad, and I don't know if you've heard the song Salad, or seen Blonde Shell. Her lyrics are fantastic, and I think she has such a great voice for. I think for American music right now. So I'll give you two, Sam Wilson's 1994 and Blonde Shell Salad.
All right. Sounds good. Well, that ends our episode for today. Thank you, Brian, for coming on and talking to us. GovLove is brought to you by ELGL, and the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. You can reach us online at elgl.org/GovLove or on X at @GovLove Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to GovLove on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.